Welcome back, everybody. Hello. Right, I've just received a complaint from someone under the Trade Descriptions Act that there were no biscuits with the tea. I'm very sorry. I'm not quite sure what's happened. Oh, no water either. Right, okay, we will make sure that you are, I don't know, I'm going to have to go out and get biscuits myself, I think. Anyway, so now we have Justin. So Justin was introduced to the global elite at a very early age. His uncle by marriage was a former director, retired director of the Bank of England. And one day he received a phone call out of the blue from another director of the Bank of England on his deathbed, telling him to look into the Bradbury. So now we are going to have an exciting extended presentation on the Bradbury and the enemy trying to attack it. So big round of applause for Justin, please.
Right, I'm just going to do a sound check to make sure you all hear me. I've got a bit of a confession. I was actually in the Green Party for 15 years, and I was involved at the higher level on party council. I know, boo, get the boos. But after the leader of the Green Party's sudden, unfortunate demise on the radio, I've got to be rather careful. I felt desperately sorry for the poor lady, but yes, so I'm rather hoping that I can keep myself articulate for the rest of the next half hour. Right, here goes. I'm going to press this, and hopefully, here we are. Now, engage the enemy more closely. What you have here is a sneak preview of Cameron's Royal Navy in about 10 years from now. Reason? No engineers required. Right. Now, how many of you here don't know about the Bradbury pound? Just give me a... Right, okay. I think it's only fair before we start that I just tell you very quickly what the Bradbury pound was. The Bradbury pound came into existence in August 1914. It was done as a way to prevent a run on the banks. It was all the gold standard in those days. In the outbreak of war, people were obviously very nervous. They wanted to withdraw their money from the banks, which were obviously being gold. So the bankers, the private bankers, were extremely worried. There was only £9 million worth of gold in the Bank of England. So the bankers went running to David Lloyd George, who was the Chancellor of the Exchequer at the time, and they said, "Can you please do something?" And he said, "Yes." And in 2 days, they got the Currency and Banknotes Act through Parliament, which authorised the Treasury, not the Bank of England, the Treasury, to issue debt-free and interest-free money based on the wealth of the nation. And there's a very good chap called Thomas Johnston who wrote a book called The Financiers and the Nation. And if you read that book, there's one section dealing with usury in the First World War. It's extremely interesting. And it was this book that really led me to what the Bradbury pound was all about. Now, the bankers didn't like this. It stopped the run of the banks, yes, but they suddenly realized they were not going to make a killing out of the killing. And so they went running back to David Lloyd George and said, "Look, can you please phase out these Bradbury pound notes?" And they were called Bradbury, by the way, because John Bradbury was the first Secretary to the Treasury, and he gave his name to it. He signed them, and that's how they became. And they were issued in £1 denomination and 10 bob notes. And they were just literally, the first batch were printed on one side only on stamp paper. And they were accepted because people liked them. They thought, well, no, this represents the wealth of our nation, so they accepted it instead of gold. Now, as I said, the bankers went running back to David Lloyd George, says, "We can't make a killing out of the killing. Can we not go back to the old arrangement where you sell bonds to us and we'll raise the money, create the money out of thin air, charge you interest, etc." And for some reason, and we don't know quite why David Lloyd George decided to phase out the Bradbury. We didn't just stop it overnight, they phased them out. In fact, they were still issuing some in the 1920s. And anyway, as a result, they went back to borrowing money from the private bankers, who many believe engineered the First World War, and indeed the Second World War. And the national debt in 1919 went up from £650 million up to £7,500 million. So the bankers made their killing out of the First World War. So that, in a nutshell, is what the Bradbury pound is. It's the same as the Lincoln's greenback dollar, and before that, you had the American settlers, the colonists, who also had a thing called colonial scrip, and that too was wonderful. Right, so let's move on. Wonderful phrase this, Vice Admiral Nelson: "No captain can do very wrong if he places his ship alongside that of the enemy." And the reason why he was so confident in that, because he knew the Royal Navy was second to none. He trusted his captains, he trusted his ships, the gunnery was superb, and he knew that if their ship, or any one naval ship, went alongside that of the enemy, the chances were that the Royal Navy would win. Well, what I'm going to be saying to you today is, when it comes to dealing with the slippery so-and-sos, the politicians at the hustings, get in amongst them. Our time has come now to take what we know is going wrong in our country, to take it to these people and let them have it. Get in their face, because we can't lose. The truth is on our side, and they can only spout lies. Now, when I last did my presentation, thank you. When I last did my presentation, I had about 20, 25 quotes from people in history, and I thought, I can't inflict that on you again, and I've only chosen one I've not used before. And I think this sums the whole thing up. When the people fear their government, there is tyranny. When the government fears the people, there is liberty. And when I think what's happening to Melanie Shaw, if I start to croak, it's because... Right. Now, the banking dynasties, along with the very little known and secretive Bank for International Settlements, and I do urge all of you to take note of this little known bank. Nobody's ever heard of it hardly. I bet probably 1% of the country knows about the Bank for International Settlements. My own MP, Tim Farron, MP for Westmoreland and Lonsdale, only last year I approached him. He'd been in Parliament for 9 years, and he said on camera, "No, well, you're going to tell me, aren't you?" I said, "Damn right I'm going to tell you. It controls 95% of the world's money supply." Okay? So the banking dynasties, along with the very little known and secretive Bank for International Settlements, want to promote monetary and financial stability throughout the world. But this stability can only be achieved if their central banking system ensures levels of unsustainable debt for nations and the allowance of blatant and complex chicanery in the world's financial markets. This all means, this is what it boils down to, that the 1% flourish whilst the rest of humanity is forced to become debt slaves to the emerging Orwellian global corporate machine that is now taking over from sovereign nations. And of course that is why we are here, to stop that process from happening. Now, this is the world that we have today. And I used these figures last time, but I've only selected 3. And I want you to think about these figures. The wealth of the 1% richest people in the world amounts to $110 trillion. That's 65 times the total wealth of the bottom half of the world's population. It's staggering. Almost half of the world's wealth is now owned by just 1% of the population. And 1 billion children worldwide are living in abject poverty, as a direct result of which 22,000 children die each day. And I think we've really got to think about the next time you tackle the politicians head on about the Bradbury or anything else, think about that. That's the reality of our world today. That's the reality of the economic system that we are allowing and which we've got to put an end to. Now, there's only one question you need to ask any politician in the coming general election. It's a bit of a long question. And by the way, we will be emailing notes to you. The BCG will be sending out notes covering what I'm saying today and advising and helping you to think how we can really take the fight to the enemy during the general election campaign. But this is the question. Why should a completely sovereign nation have to borrow money from the private financial sector when history has clearly shown that such a nation can embrace national credit and issue and control its own debt-free and interest-free money in order to provide the proper liquidity needed for a happy, industrious, and prosperous nation? They can't give you an answer to that. Now, I've got a surprise for you. Up there, you've got the Rogues Gallery. And that's what we're going to be up against in the hustings. I'm going to come on to that later on. But have a look down the bottom right here. There's a guy called Alex Salmond. Well, I'm now going to stop speaking now because we have a surprise guest. And I'm going to hand you over, once again, to Daisy, who is going to announce that surprise guest.
It's not Alex Salmond. This person needs no introduction. He has worked tirelessly on the Holly Gregg case closely with her and her mother. He was sent to prison because he wrote a letter to Alex Salmond and was accused of harassment. I'm delighted to welcome to the stage Robert Green.
I don't know what to say about that, ladies and gentlemen, but I'll tell you, when I turn up with my guitar, you'll change your tune, honestly. No, first of all, I'd like to just say very briefly, thank you very much. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak today. I'm only going to do it for a few minutes just to tell you what you can do in the next few weeks while the general election campaign is going. But I'd like to just take the opportunity of thanking all the wonderful people, many of you in this room, who've helped me by writing letters to me, writing letters to MPs, writing letters to the Scottish authorities, doing everything you possibly can to help. Mainly not for me, it's not really for me, although you're helping me, it's for Holly Gregg and the other children of abuse, paedophile abuse and Satanist ritual abuse that is prevalent in Scotland at the moment. What you can do right now is we have, as I said, the general election coming up, and it looks as if a number of parties could be influential in running our country. One of those parties, we all have our own views about various leaders and the parties. I'm sure in this room there are a wide variety of opinion. But one party that must not in any way be allowed to have an influence on the running of our country is the Scottish Nationalist Party. And this is not to do with nationalism. There's nothing wrong with being a Scottish nationalist. But there is something wrong about supporting the people who currently have hijacked the Scottish Nationalist Party. Now, obviously, in many cases regarding sexual abuse, you can always sort of intimate various leaders are involved in it and all the rest of it, but we can't actually prove it. We can probably, a lot of innuendo and so forth. But there's just one case in which the sexual abuse of children can be directly aimed at a national leader. In fact, two national leaders. One is Alex Salmond, and the second is his successor, Nicola Sturgeon. Here is the headline. This has been published. It's on the 26th of May 2011. The Information Commissioner decided that the Scottish Government, that's Alex Salmond and the Scottish ministers, which included Nicola Sturgeon at that time, had breached 10.1 and 21 of the Freedom of Information Scotland Act in resisting queries about the Holly Gregg rape case. Now, you would have thought, perhaps, with that warning and that ruling that can't be rescinded from the Information Commissioner, that Mr. Salmond and his party would do something about it. But they still ignored it. And on the 11th of July 2011, they were given 24 hours. This is the whole Scottish Cabinet were given 24 hours to actually deal with this case, or they would face criminal charges of contempt of court. Now, ladies and gentlemen, do you not think that might be of major public interest to the people of Scotland? Do you? Yes. But it was suppressed completely. The only magazine that actually printed it was a legal magazine called The Firm, who did an article on the 3rd of June when the first breach was announced, and then on the 11th of July when Salmond and his gang were trying to get away with things. That was suppressed on the orders of Alex Salmond's lawyer, and that man is Peter Watson of Levy and McRae. Some of you have heard of this man. He's currently facing a writ from Ernst & Young over a possible connection with a £400 million racket okay? And he is Salmon's solicitor, and he's been more than anyone else has tried to do everything to discredit the Holly Gregg campaign, right? And of course, he's also a sheriff, which may be of interest to people here. And this week, he was suspended from his role of being a sheriff. But of course, we won't go on to that because we haven't got time. But Sheriff Watson is by no means he's not the only corrupt sheriff in Scotland. There are some just as bad as he is, but we won't spend too much time on that. However, this is the little girl. Some of you have seen pictures of us, the brave Holly Gregg, and she is enormously brave. Some people say you've stuck your neck out, you've been to prison twice, you know, trying to defend this girl and perhaps other children who've been abused. But one of the key matters in this is that I was present when Holly Gregg was interviewed by Grampian Police, by DC Lisa Jane Evans, on the 8th of September 2009. Holly, who has Down syndrome, spent 3.5 hours going through her rape ordeals at the hands of 22 people. All identified, locations were named. She had all, unlike most rape cases or sexual abuse cases, Holly had a plethora of independent expert witness evidence. Many of you have seen it from various doctors, from the Down Syndrome Association. Even the police themselves, who initially talked to her, said that Holly is a truthful victim, a truthful witness, and an entirely innocent victim. Not an alleged victim, a real victim. Now, following that interview on the 8th of September, which was harrowing in the extreme, and it's something I can never forget, and I think if any of you had ever been present, you'd understand my position, why you can't turn away from this. You cannot turn away from this. It is too serious. It is horrific. And some of the issues involved certainly do involve satanic ritual abuse. And this is why I was prepared to stick my neck out and stand for Parliament in 2010 to try and bring this matter to the attention of the people of Scotland, and especially the people of Aberdeen, because I stood for Aberdeen South, which is where the offences were alleged to have taken place. And I genuinely thought there was a real risk to the people in that city, because this had been going on for a long time, and we have medical records going back from 1990 to show that Holly was even at risk at the age of 10 there. So it is absolutely horrific. And those, I have to say, we can't prove anything about the people concerned, but clearly there is a real danger. There has to be a potential danger there to the public. And the police are doing absolutely nothing about it other than persecuting me and all the other brave people who've stood up for this case, including Tim Rustage, who somebody one of you are from the human rights activist who was also thrown into prison over this case. However, going back to what we can do is, please, whenever you're going towards your MPs, please contact them and ask them when they are going to actually do something about Mr. Salmond and Mrs. Sturgeon, or Ms. Sturgeon, over their breaches of the law on this case. The Scottish media are absolutely terrified of this. For some reason, they're terrified of Alex Salmond. I don't know why. I don't know whether they're just afraid of Salmond or perhaps the even more sinister individuals who stand behind him. But they won't even publish this, which is obviously from the Information Commissioner, appointed by the Queen, who has ruled that they have broken the law. And the Scottish people are kept completely away from the Scottish people as a whole. Only those people who perhaps read the legal magazines would know anything about it. In fact, the reason that I've been facing another possible prison sentence on Wednesday in Aberdeen at 2 o'clock in the afternoon is the fact that I wrote a polite letter to Alex Salmond's own constituency. The secretary there is a man called Neil Bailey. And I just said politely that the First Minister, or in his role as MSP, member of the Scottish Parliament, had not only neglected to help over the expert witness evidence which I presented to him personally in a meeting with him personally, but also had breached the law in his attempts to stop the case coming out. Mr. Bailey knew nothing about it, his own constituency secretary. So Mr. Salmond was not only keeping this from the people of Scotland as a whole, he was actually keeping it from his own constituency committee and the very people who elected him directly to office. The other person he didn't tell, because I contacted him, was Sir Brian Souter of Stagecoach, who's the principal donor to the Scottish Nationalist Party. And he didn't know anything about it either. But now it's time for the people of Scotland and the people of Britain now, because of the general election, to know all about the misdemeanours of Mr Salmond and, legally, Miss Sturgeon as well. I think everybody in this country deserves to know, and as a result of that, I hope they will know about the Holly Gregg case and its true horrors, of which we have to say with what we now know is the tip of the iceberg in the whole of the United Kingdom. We're not just picking on Scotland here, it's everywhere, and I think we all know about that. Well, thank you very much for your support.
I hate my job. I didn't want to interrupt you, but back to Justin.
Thank you, Robert. So, it was just by sheer luck I put that picture in with Salmond and the other lady, I can't remember her name. But anyway, it's just sheer luck, so I'm glad I did. Right, moving on. Okay, we've got to get organised. We've got to take now the fight to the enemy. And the good news is, and I speak as one who actually stood twice in 2 general elections for the Green Party, and I'm very familiar with the landscape, the political landscape that comes with a general election. And I think it's fair to say that politicians, it doesn't matter how powerful they are at their most vulnerable when they're having to woo the voter. And they are vulnerable because you'll see a well-known household politician walking along a street with 1 or 2 aides or 1 or 2 things. You can just get in there and really make their life hell. Peacefully, but very firmly, with the right questions. And as I said, you can do an awful lot. So we've talked about this idea of setting up flying columns. It's just a name. Flying columns, I've just used an illustration here of the long-range desert group in the last war. But we're talking about special forces. We're talking about the idea of elite, hard-hitting forces that can go in quickly and then get the hell out quickly. And I always sum them up as minimum effort, maximum effect. So, okay, well, let's see what we can do. Well, these flying columns must influence the electorate and the election in a parliamentary constituency by, and there's 4 points, actively seeking out and peacefully confronting the vote-seeking politicians on the hustings with difficult and embarrassing questions concerning their levels of ignorance about money supply and who actually creates it and how. As I said, my own MP after 9 years had never heard of the Bank for International Settlements. Enlisting public support and political commitment to the principle of national credit and the immediate restoration of a debt-free and interest-free Treasury-issued Bradbury pound to end austerity. Exposing the now provably corrupt and fraudulent judicial and legal system that puts corporate greed and criminality before the common law and the ancient rights of the British people. And obviously you're going to hear a lot more from Guy later on in the conference about that. Yeah. And finally, demanding effective and immediate action to bring to justice the perpetrators of institutional child abuse and to expose and arrest establishment-led high-level paedophile rings, just as Robert has just described. So, you know, that's what we're going to do. And if we do it well, we will bring down the political establishment. You can see. Okay, I'm just being asked to fly off. Okay, I'm just going to go through very quickly a to-do list for the flying columns. Purchase a digital camcorder that I'm told by somebody, any iPad or any of this new technology. Make sure you can record what happens. Recruit helpers through social media and going down to the pub. Design local leaflets and make placards. You know who your local rogue is. Enjoy it. Build up a relationship with the local newspapers and local radio stations. I work for a local newspaper and I'm no longer considered completely mad. They think I'm only half mad. They're actually thinking I might be onto something. Meet with the local Chamber of Trade and other organisations representing the local economy. Interview the parliamentary candidates for the UK column and alternative media. Actually put the microphone in front of their face. Meet up and brief other campaigning groups, especially students and those opposed to the transatlantic trade and investment partnership and the austerity cutbacks too, and the privatisation of the NHS. By the way, there is a political party standing just for the NHS. They've got about a dozen candidates, and I'm going to be talking to them about the Bradbury to say, hey, the whole thing's a lie. Austerity, cutbacks to the NHS, all a lie. Attend all public meetings for the candidates and plan your knockout questions carefully. Make sure you put yourselves in different parts of the room so they don't think you're plotting. Create a high-profile truth surgery on the high street. Get a few trestle tables out, leaflets, and be there. Be like a political party, but you're not, and you're just telling people the truth. Find out when the high-profile politicians are coming into town and ambush them. That's lovely. And I've left out one. Have fun, be friendly, and be mischievous. The two come together. So, when Mr. Cameron comes into town, or the other chap, the Labour fellow, whatever his name is, when you do, go up to them, be really nice, and ask the knockout questions, and make sure you're being filmed by your people, because we'll love it. Put your footage onto social media and recruit new people to join in your future campaigns. Now, I know I need to be silenced now, so I'm going to round off. You can ask me more questions about the flying columns and what to do, and what's happening in Greece as well, because trust me, very soon that's all going to backfire, and we will have the perfect opportunity then to say national credit, and that would save the Greek nations. Listen, thanks for your time, and I'll come back to you tomorrow.
Thank you, Justin. Always entertaining.